Hello, everyone. Welcome to the AP Computer Science Principles webinar for students on the Create Performance task. Apologies for starting 5 minutes late. We had some technical difficulties, but we're here with you now. I'm Maureen Reyes. Well, I'll do my introduction. I'm Maureen Reyes. I work in the AP program, and our main presenter today will be Crystal Furman, who works in AP Curriculum Instruction and Assessment. So without further ado, I'll kick this over to Crystal, who will lead the presentation.
Thanks, Maureen. Apologies for not being on camera this evening. That's one of the technical difficulties. But the other thing is that we've had a tremendous amount of response from students. This is one of our largest webinars ever. So kudos to you all for taking the initiative to be here tonight and talk through the Create Performance task, which does comprise 30% of your overall AP score for AP Computer Science Principles. So what we're going to do tonight is I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the exam, overview of the student handouts and student guidelines that hopefully if you haven't read through them, at least you're maybe aware of them and you're starting to dive into those at this point. And then we'll do a little bit of an overview of the scoring guidelines. We have a series of videos that will be released in the next week or so that one of our expert AP teachers have recorded, where they have actually taken each row of the rubric and paired some responses with that to show you what earns the point and what things to watch for. So there will be a follow-on for this. So if this is not 100% what you need, know that there's more coming for that. And then we will do some debriefing and closing and talk about how to submit your work to the digital portfolio. Okay, so a little bit about the exam. This Create Performance task comprises 30% of your overall score for your Computer Science Principles exam score. The other 70% comes from the end of course multiple choice exam, which is given in May. And there's actually a couple additional digital administrations that are given after the main administration in May. You do have to take both of those two pieces to get your score. And some people have asked, like, has COVID impacted that? Are you just taking the performance task? The answer to that question is no, there is going to be both a multiple choice and the Create Performance test to comprise that 70% of your score. Some people also mentioned in their questions that they're taking the end of course exam in administration 2 in June, and could they submit their performance task later because they're not taking the end of course exam until later? And the answer to that is no. We actually have to have all submissions by May 20th, 2021 at 11:59 p.m. Eastern time because they all get scored at the AP reading. So if you don't know about the AP reading, we bring high school and college professors from all across the United States together in a digital format to score all of your performance tasks. So we have hundreds of professionals that look at your work and rate it. And so in order for your work to be scored on time, it needs to be in the digital portfolio marked as final. So you have 3 components that you need to submit as final by May 20th, 11:59 p.m. Eastern time. So that is a hard deadline. Typically our deadline is the end of April, but because we know that some schools have gotten a late start or you've been maybe losing some class time due to doing some asynchronous class time, we have extended the deadline to our very latest that we possibly can accept work, which is this May 20th date. Okay, so moving right along. Some other questions that we have heard along the way that I want to make sure I share with you. Can students work on the Create PT beyond the 12 hours of class time? Absolutely. You are allowed to work outside of class on this. We want you to do your very best work. And so we require a 12-hour as a minimum that your teachers should set aside that time for you to work and work collaboratively with peers, if that's your choice, on the program, and then also independently write and independently create your video. But if you need more time, you can take more time so that you're submitting your absolute best work for the Create Performance task. So where can you find some more information? In the course and exam description, which there is a link in the resources section of this webinar. This is also located online on AP Central. There is an exam section. It starts on page 161. And the page that I really wanted to draw to everyone's attention is this performance task verbs. So a lot of times we get questions about, well, what do you mean about describe? What do you mean about compare? This table will help you to understand a little bit more about what do we mean about those things. So I encourage you to take a look there. In addition, there is a student handout section. So the student handout section has a lot of really great information for you as students. The first part is it's going to give you an overview about what you have to do. So there are 3 main components to this performance task that you'll have to complete. The first part is you have to create a program. A lot of questions tonight and in your pre-registration about what's the topic for the program? Can we create anything we want? How rigorous does it have to be? Some students are concerned because this is the first time they've ever done anything with programming. Well, that's good, because this is the class for you. If this is the first time you've ever taken anything in programming, we want you in here and we want you to demonstrate what you learned this year. And so we have opened this up. You can use any programming language that you want and you feel comfortable with to create your performance task program. And as long as you're meeting the requirements for the task, anything goes in terms of that. And then you want to create a video that is going to showcase how your program is running. And then there is a written response portion. And we're going to talk through those components tonight. So let's talk about the program code and what you need to have in it. So it's really not so much about the topic as much as it is, are you able to demonstrate the programming that you have learned, the programming knowledge that you have learned this year? So you have to have some kind of instructions for input. And there's a lot of conversation this last week about what do we mean by instructions. We mean you have to have program code that allows the program to accept some type of input. Input could be in the form of entering text. It could be in the form of clicking buttons. Lots of different ways to input into a program. You also have to use at least one list or collection. In some programming language, they call this an array. Others, it's a dictionary. Any of those things work. We have some blue boxes on the side of this page that kind of go through and talk to you about what things are acceptable. We have lots of questions about some of the languages that you're using that have built-in databases that you want to leverage. Absolutely. Please make sure you cite those. That should be cited in the program code in the comments. You need to have at least one procedure that contributes to the program's intended purpose. So it can't just be any procedure. It needs to be something that does something in your program. In other words, you're calling that procedure at some point in your program, at least once. The procedure should have a name, obviously. It needs to have a return type if that's necessary, and it should have one or more parameters. Okay, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more as we go through. Inside of that procedure, you should have an algorithm, and that algorithm should contain sequencing, which just means that you have multiple statements in there that are doing things in order. Selection, which is your conditionals, so probably like an if statement or a switch statement, depending on the language you're using. And then some kind of iteration, a while loop, a repeat until, a for loop, a do while, whatever kind of iteration is happening in your program. Recursion also counts as iteration. So if you have that, that would be fine as well. If you have selection, if you have iteration, you automatically have sequencing, because sequencing just means you have statements that are being done in order. You have to call this procedure. Like I said, in order for it to be something that's being used in your program, it has to be called somewhere, and you have to call it at least one time. And then you have to have some kind of instructions for output based on this input and functionality. So what do we mean by instructions? We mean you have to have program code that tells the computer to do some kind of output there. Okay, so one question that we keep getting: who can a student collaborate with on a create performance task? You are allowed to collaborate with another CSP student. It can be someone in your class. It can be in someone in another class at your school. A lot of students take this class online, and so they're maybe not at the same school, but they're all in the same CSP class. So it needs to be another current AP CSP student that you can collaborate with. And when we talk about collaboration, it can be 2 or more students. Some ways, and these are just some ways that it could happen, and this is not an exhaustive list by any stretch, but it could be 2 students who are doing the whole program together, and they're using pair programming to do that. When they submit their programs are going to be identical, and that is totally okay because they were developed in collaboration. It could be two or more students that decided that they wanted to divide a larger, more complex program up into separate pieces, and they work on their separate pieces and then they put those together. So that's another way that you could look at it. It could be students giving feedback. Maybe they didn't actually do anything with the program itself, but they're giving feedback and helping to make the program better. It could be students that are helping with debugging assistance. Maybe you're not allowed to ask your teacher for help, but maybe you're struggling to debug something and you get another student to look at the program code with you. That is a form of collaboration. The program that you submit, you should be really actively engaged in creating. If you're not actively engaged, you're going to have a really difficult time answering those individual written responses. So answer this question: how many students can collaborate on the create performance task? It doesn't really, we haven't set a limit there. Typically it's 2 to 3 students is what we're seeing is a really effective number. If you get beyond that, it's very difficult for you to be actively engaged, and it's going to be very difficult for you to write your independent written responses. If you are taking program code from another source, maybe you are using, we had a lot of questions tonight earlier about what if we're using a library from, I want to use Turtle Graphics and I want to use a library out of Python. Absolutely, you can do that. You should be citing anything that you're taking from someone else. Okay, and you can cite that right in the comments of your program code. Okay. The next part of the handouts kind of go through what is required in the video. In your video, you need to showcase input, output. You need to showcase some kind of functionality in there. And then be really mindful of these video constraints. The digital portfolio, which is the submission platform that we use to accept your responses, will not allow you to submit a video that violates these size limitations and the length of the video. So if you go 1 minute and 1 second long, it will not allow you to submit it. So if you're having trouble submitting, check the length of your video. That could be part of the issue. And I just talked through this. So we ask that you do not have anything that identifies you as a student in the video. This is for your protection. We do a lot to educate our readers about implicit bias. So if they hear a certain voice, they might make conjectures about who that person is. And so because of that, we've asked you not to do voice narration. You can do text captions if you want, but you don't have to do anything in the video other than showcase your program. If there's voice narration in there, you're not going to be deducted points for having that. It truly is to protect your privacy, because we want you scored on your work and not on some implicit bias opinion that has snuck in. Like I said, we do a great job of educating our readers so that that doesn't happen, but it's to your benefit if you just keep any distinguishing informations out of your submissions. And again, these are the file formats for your video. It cannot be more than 1 minute and it cannot exceed 30 megabytes in size. And I just talked about this a little bit. Why can students not use voice narration? It really is for your protection and to protect your anonymity. And we do a great job training readers, but implicit bias is called implicit for a reason. And we want to make sure that you are judged based on your work. Okay, and then the next part of the student handouts goes into the written responses. And there are 4 written responses that you have to answer, 3A through 3D, and we're going to go through all of those. But before we do, one question that I keep seeing is, and somebody asked it tonight, can we go over that word count? And is there a penalty for going over? The word count limit is 750 words. We do give a grace of 100 words. So your max actually is 850 words. Once you reach that word capacity, The AP Digital Portfolio, the platform that we're using to collect your work, will not allow you to add any more text to any of the response boxes. We have a word count that is going to display for each entry box and also at the top and the bottom of the page so that you can keep track of that as you're entering your work into the digital portfolio. So is there a penalty? No, you'll have to edit your work down to be less than 850 in order to submit. Okay, so let's talk through these responses. 3A, you are answering responses for these three things. You're describing the overall purpose of the program. Why did you create this program is essentially what we're asking. What is the purpose of it? Why would somebody use this? That is different from the functionality. And somebody asked this tonight. They asked, what is the difference between a purpose and the functionality? The purpose is why you created. The functionality is really like, what is it doing? And that kind of can get a little muddled. I can understand. But you know, if you're creating a video game, it has a purpose, and then its functionality is what the game actually does. So why did we create it and what it does? And then number 3, describe the input and output that's demonstrated in the video that you created. The answers to these 3 written responses are scored alongside your video in order for you to get a score on that first rubric row. For 3B, you are capturing and pasting 2 program code segments that you developed during the administration of this task. So it has to be something that you did either with a partner or on your own that contain a list that's being used to manage complexity. It has to be a list that's being used to manage complexity. We have examples on AP Central of students who used a list that didn't manage complexity, and so that did cost them points there. So make sure that you're thinking about, is there a useful use for this list? How useful is it in my program, or am I just trying to check a box here? So the first program code segment should show how data has been stored in the list. So some people are reading data in from a file. That would be one thing. Some people are, have a loop that they're adding information to a list. That would be another thing. There's multiple different ways that you can showcase data being put into the list. And the second is showing how it's being used. So you're creating some new data or analyzing data from this existing data. And then in your written response, you have to identify the name of the list. So that should be pretty easy. The name of my list is vegetables, because I stored my vegetables in there. And then describe what the data contained in the list represents in the program. So what are you using this list for? And then the last thing is, how is it managing complexity in your program? And you're going to do that by explaining why your program code could not be written, or how it would be written differently if you did not use this list. An important thing to understand, and this is in the little blue boxes on the side of the instructions, is that a data abstraction must make the program code easier in some way. So alternatives would be a little bit more complex, or it would make these abstractions actually make it easier for us to maintain the program. So if we changed the size of our list, we added data elements to the list, we shouldn't have to go in and make a lot of code modifications if we're using the data abstraction correctly. So just be careful of those tips on the side. Okay, for 3C, what you're doing is you're capturing and pasting 2 program code segments you developed during the administration of the test that contain a student-developed procedure that implements an algorithm used in your program and a call to that procedure. So the first program code segment must be a student-developed procedure that contains the name and the return type. It needs to contain 1 or more parameters that have an effect on the functionality of the procedure, and implements an algorithm that includes sequencing, selection, and iteration. The second program code segment that you are going to submit is an example of how this procedure is being called in your program. Like I said, if it only is useful if you're actually calling it. And then you're going to write a written response that describes in general what the identified procedure does and how it contributes to the overall functionality. and then explain in detailed steps how the algorithm within that procedure works. And your explanation has to be detailed enough for someone else to recreate it. One thing to be careful of is anything that is built-in functionality and procedures, such as event handlers, button clicks, that kind of thing. Main methods are not considered student developed. If you didn't name it, then it's not considered student developed. Okay, and then for the last prompt, you are providing a written response that does the following three things. Describes 2 calls to the procedures. Now, these can be hypothetical. We get this question a lot. Do I have to put 2 calls to the procedure in my program? No, you have to put at least 1 in the program. And then these could be hypothetical calls. And each call should represent a different part of the algorithm being executed. You should describe what conditions are being tested, and then identify the results of each call. So your algorithm has iteration in it. It also has selection in it. And because it has selection in it, you should be testing that selection. You know, what happens when that selection statement is true and what happens when it's not true. Or you should be testing the iteration. What happens if it iterates 10 times? What happens if it doesn't iterate at all? And that would be those different paths that you're representing. Do students need to have 2 calls to their procedure in the program? No, they don't. These are hypothetical calls. You need to have at least 1 call in your program in order to satisfy your program, but you do not need to have 2. Do students need to write an if-else to satisfy the 2 paths? You do not need to have an if-else. If you have an if, that represents one path, if that's true, and the other path would be that you don't do anything if it's false. What about 1 call with a list that causes different paths? The contents of the list could be hypothetical. So if you're passing a list in, you could make the contents of that list be hypothetical, and so that would and have it so that it illustrates the 2 paths. Again, these are hypothetical calls. You're describing them. You're not showing them. So you can say, if I pass this to my method, this is what's happening, or my procedure, this is what's happening. And if I pass something different, this is what's happening. All right, getting into the student guidelines. I'm going to kind of go through this section a little quickly because there's a lot to read here, but I encourage you to take a lot of time and read through these guidelines. The first thing I want to point out is our plagiarism policy. Every year, the least fun part of my job is to read through plagiarism appeals from students who didn't adhere to our plagiarism policy. So please be careful when you're doing the collaboration that you stop collaborating when the program is done and you transition into individual written response mode so that you are not in this position where you are being accused of plagiarism.
Crystal, can I jump in for a second?
Sure.
We have a link to the student guidelines in the resources section of this webinar, correct? Because students are asking where they can find it. So if you go to the resources section of this webinar now, you'll see links to the student handout. You'll also find the presentation that Crystal is presenting right now. There are a lot of questions about the presentation. So the slides are in the resources section right now. Links to the student handout and other useful links that you will need are all available in the resources section.
Yep, our scoring guidelines are there too. Yep, great. So this section here is really what you should be doing before you begin the performance task. Hopefully everybody has kind of spent their school year doing some practice. They have acquired the knowledge and the skills to complete the performance task. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time reading through these bullets, but that's essentially what you should have done before you started the Create performance task. You should have acquired some knowledge, maybe done some practice, gotten some feedback from your teacher on a different project so that you are prepared to take this test. You also, should have practiced like creating videos and creating PDF documents and that kind of thing. But what's more important is what must you do? You must submit your performance task prior to the submission deadline. So all of your teachers are begging you to submit it early. And some of you will wait until 11:58 and you will try to, on May 20th, and you will try to submit this task. And some of you will run out of time and it will be very, very, very sad. So we are going to encourage you to not wait until the very last day, to the very last hour, to the very last minute to submit your Create performance task. As I said at the top, we have extended the deadline as far as possible. So if at 11:59 you're still in the process of submitting, you might not get it in. It does take a little bit to submit your performance task. There are attestations that you have to do, so it's not as simple as, oh, I'm just going to take 30 seconds here and submit my task. It's probably a 10-minute, maybe 20-minute task for you to final submit. So make sure you're planning your time ahead. You should really have scheduled this out and have a calendar that you're following so that you are working and checking off those tasks and have everything completed on time. Definitely go through, we've given you a good overview tonight, but go through and really read through those task directions and then the scoring guidelines. And both of those, like Maureen said, are linked in the resources section. Make sure that when you're writing your responses, you're really applying the knowledge that you've learned this year. Make sure you are acknowledging any work that you're getting from someone else, and then add comments to your code to clarify any functionality to the program code or acknowledge creditors. Things that you may not do. You cannot seek assistance in writing, revising, amending, correcting any of your work. This includes debugging your program other than collaborative partners, which is another CSP student. That's the only person that you can get help from when you're writing your program or debugging your program. You cannot get this help from your teacher, your older sibling, your parent, your uncle. None of that works. Make sure that you submit, you may not submit a practice performance task, so make sure you're submitting original work for this. So if your teacher assigned you a practice performance task, you cannot submit that as your final work. You could use that as a basis for your final work, and you can add to it and add functionality to it and then write about that new functionality. But that base project that you use for practice cannot be submitted for your final Create performance task. You should not seek answers or provide feedback on answers to the prompts. Remember, the written response prompts have to be written individually. Do not collaborate during your video or your written response. Do not revise your work once you have completed and submitted it as final to the digital portfolio. So you will not be able to do that. Things that you can do: collaborate with a partner on the ideation and the development, including error testing of your program code. Follow a timeline and a schedule. That's just really good practice. Seek assistance in the formation of groups and resolutions to collaboration issues. We don't want the fact that you and your collaborative partner are disagreeing about something to hold up your progress and impact your score. So if you need help to resolve something, that is a time where your teacher can definitely step in. Make sure you're seeking clarification on the prompts. If there's things that you don't understand about what we're asking, look at those verbs that we have at that one in that one exam section, but also ask your teacher, like, I don't quite understand. They're not going to be able to help answer your question. Some students have put questions in like, are these good procedure calls? We can't answer those questions about your task specifically, and neither can your teacher. But if you have a question about what something means, like the difference between functionality and purpose, your teacher definitely can answer those questions for you. Work on the performance task outside of the designated time. You may do that. We've talked about that already. You can seek assistance in resolving technical problems. If you have an issue with your computer and it's not working, definitely get some help. And we do encourage you to keep a programming journal. The programming journals have been really helpful to students over the last several years, where they're able to keep kind of a log about what they're doing. And then they kind of use that as some of the evidence that they pull in when they write their written responses. All right, the scoring guidelines. Again, this is linked in the resources section as well. It's also linked on the student page on EP Central. There are also 9 sample responses that you can refer to and see how things are graded. There are 6 rubric rows. Some questions that were submitted prior and this evening was, well, what's the weighting? There's 6 rows, but is there a row that I should pay more attention to because it's more important than other rows? And the answer is no. There's 6 rows. Each is worth 5% of your overall grade because create is 30%. So each of these is 5%. They're all equally weighted. You can, except where otherwise noted, each point is earned independently. So there are some places where it'll say, you know, refer to the code in 3C for 3D, but mostly they're independently rated, each rubric row. So if you lose row 4, for example, that doesn't mean you're going to lose row 5. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Responses will be evaluated on the rationale that you provide, on what you write. So a lot of students have asked, what about the program code? We only use the program code if we don't quite understand how the program is written and how the pieces you've selected fit into the overall scheme of things. We rely almost 100% on what you write about your program code. The program code PDF document is really just used in case we don't quite understand what the code is doing because it's out of context. So it allows the readers to get some context for your code. But other than that, you are evaluated on what you say in your written response and the program code snippets that you provide. Terms and phrases defined in the terminology list are italicized. So as you go through here, if you're like, what do they mean by input? What do they mean by program functionality, output? The last page of the scoring guideline will show each one of these terms and what we mean by that term. I just answered this. What percentage? The create is 30% of your overall score, 6 equally weighted rubric rows. So do not think that one is better than the other. They are all equal, and they're all 5%. Some people have also asked, is there partial credit on a rubric row? And the answer is no. This is a binary rubric. So either you meet all the criteria and you earn the row, or you do not. So be sure that you have looked at each one of the bullets for the criteria and that you are answering each one of those. So here is a side-by-side between the test directions and the scoring guidelines. And we have taken great strides to make sure that these align. So if you look at the test directions and you follow that, and the test directions have little checkboxes for you so you can check it off. Do I have input? Do I have functionality? Do I have output in my video? And you can check those off as you're looking at your work. And if you do have those things, you'll see that that aligns to 3 bullets in the scoring guidelines. So as you check them off, hopefully that means that the reader will be able to check them off as well. And then you'll see in the written response here, the blue parts align, describe the overall purpose of the program. You see that as bullet 1 in the scoring guideline for the written response. The orange describe the functionality. You see that in the scoring guidelines. And then the pink or purple describe the input and output, and you see that in the scoring guidelines. So if you're going through and you're doing a really good job of answering these questions, those align directly to the scoring guidelines. You'll also see decision rules in here. And so the decision rules are really meant for the readers. They help the readers understand what they can and cannot give. It gives some leniency to some of the rubric rows in some places. It also helps to further define what we will not award points for. So some people have asked, like, my video is too long. It's over a minute in length. What can I do? Can I stop it in the middle? And we really want a continuous running. We don't want a whole bunch of screenshots. We don't want a storyboard. We really want to see the program running. So what I would recommend is you don't have to show the entire program running. You need to show some input, some output, and some functionality. And so you need to do a video grab of that. And that could be in the middle of your program running. It doesn't have to be right from the beginning on through. But what we need to have is a continuous running. So you see it says do not award the point if that's true, that the video does not show continuous running. Rubric row 2, and I'm just going to kind of go through these a little quickly. So as I mentioned, we have a series of videos that are going to be coming out in the next couple of weeks. The first one will really deep dive into this first rubric row on the input-output functionality in the video. The second one is going to cover rows 2 and 3, which are on the written response part 3B. So I'm going to refer you to those. These are about the list and the managing of complexity. Row 4 and 5 are about that procedure. 4 is centered on the procedure. We want to know, do you know how to write a procedure with parameters? And row 5 is centered around, do you know how to write an algorithm? And so there will be a video dedicated to row 4 and 5, and then there will be a video dedicated to row 6, the testing. But what I do want to pause and take a second to talk about is this information in row 4 and 5 and answer some of the questions that we have seen. So some people have been asking about the forever loop, and does that count as iteration? And the answer is yes. We actually have a sample, it's sample F, that you can find on AP Central on the student page, and you'll see that that has a forever loop, and it is earning the point. They have to be meaningful, though. They can't just be a loop that doesn't do anything. You'll see some examples of loops where the loop doesn't matter. It's inconsequential. It might loop one time, and so it doesn't matter whether it's there or not, and so that would not earn the point. So the readers will be really checking to make sure that it's a meaningful loop. But this is the other question that we've seen a lot. There is a section on the scoring guidelines for row 5 that seems to be confusing some people, because it says that you can earn row 5 even if you don't have a procedure. And this is me and the development committee allowing some leniency for students. So like I said, row 4 is about, do you know how to write a procedure? And row 5 is about, do you know how to write an algorithm? And so we try to separate these things out. So that's why that bullet is there. Of course, if you have a procedure with an algorithm in it, then you get to earn 4 and 5. But here's the way that we looked at it. So let's consider these scenarios. So let's consider the first one. The procedure has a parameter that has an algorithm. It has sequencing, selection, and iteration. So row 4 is looking, and I'm just looking at the programming part. I'm not looking at the what they explain or describe. I'm just looking at the program code. And so row 4 is looking for a procedure that has a parameter. And so it would be okay for that part. And row 5 is looking for an algorithm with sequencing, selection, and iteration. So that's okay. But what if a student doesn't know how to do both of these two things? How are we going to score them? So let's look at this other situation. It has a procedure, it has a parameter, but the algorithm doesn't have everything it's supposed to have in it. So I think most people are like, okay, well, I understand what's going to happen here. They have a procedure with parameters, so they're going to get row 4, but they don't know how to write algorithms. And people are usually okay with this. They're like, yeah, that totally makes sense. And then we come to this last situation. They have an algorithm that contains sequencing, selection, and iteration, but it's not enclosed in a procedure. Well, they don't get row 4 because we said that's about procedures, but we don't want to also take away row 5. This student that knows how to write an algorithm with sequencing, selection, iteration learned a really valuable skill in CSP. And so we really want to award them that point for that row. So this is the situation where that decision rule that seems to be a little bit confusing is trying to prevent students from losing 2 points because they don't know how to write a procedure. We're trying to give points for what students know versus penalizing them harshly for something that they don't know. So hopefully that clears that up. And then row 6, like I said, is about the testing. All of this we will go through much more in depth in those video series that are going to be released. So if you're looking for more information on the scoring guidelines, that'll be coming soon. Absolutely. So this just a reminder that we want to make sure that you are submitting by May 20th, 2021 at 11:59 Eastern Time. This is for your protection. Like I said, we do not want you to get cut off if you try to submit at 11:55 p.m. Eastern Time. Yeah, might not make it. So listen to your teachers, submit by the 18th, and all will be well, and use those couple days as a buffer. Okay, so what are you going to do? there is an entire document. I believe this is also linked in the resources. It is a student guide to the digital portfolio and how to submit. Please consult that document. It'll really be helpful. So when you go into the digital portfolio, you log in with your College Board account. Make sure you do not create a new login. It should be the same one that you're using for AP Classroom. If you have multiple logins, it causes lots of issues. So hopefully everybody's done that login information already. You go to the digital portfolio, and there are the 3 sections there on the left-hand side. There's the program code, the video, and the written response. And so what you're going to do is, for each one of those, you're going to select one of those sections that you want to upload. And for the video and for the program code, you are going to upload a file. So on the very bottom, it says File Upload and Submission. And you're going to click Upload Now. And you're going to select the file that you want to upload. It will show you your latest upload on the bottom of the screen. It's visible both to teachers and students, so that's great. So you should be able to see. Now, this is not final submitted to us. If you just upload files, they will not come to us unless you do some more work on that. So make sure that you don't just stop with the upload. There's more to do. You can also download it and see what it looks like. We recommend that you do that just to make sure that you haven't accidentally submitted an earlier version or accidentally submitted the wrong file. Every year we have students that, oh, darn, I submitted the wrong thing. It's not too late. Upload a new version. It will, when it comes time to final submit, it will final submit your most recent upload. Okay, then you'll go on. So you've uploaded the video, you'll upload your program code. Now we get into the written response. This is a little bit new for your teachers this year too. This is a new process for us, but it's got some really great functionality that we hope that you'll really love. So this is going to mirror what you see in the CED, in the student handouts. You will see the directions, you will see the prompts with boxes, and you'll see the exact same thing online in the digital portfolio. So on the left, I've got the CED and the student handouts look that way. And on the right-hand side is what you're going to see in the digital portfolio. And you see they're exactly the same. We've got some text boxes there, and you see above the text boxes as they wrote words, it says 16 words, 61 words. At the very top, you see it says total words 77. So it's keeping track. Your maximum word count is 850. We gave you a 100-word grace, so that's it. Once you exceed that, it will not allow you to enter any more words in. Okay, so like I said, these are exactly the same here. You've got your word counts. Okay. To upload images, I think the easiest thing to do is for you to take a screenshot of your code. So, I have a little print screen button on my computer. I click that, I take a screen grab, and then you can just paste it into this box. If that doesn't work for you, that's fine. You want to do some editing to it. You want to make sure that it's the right size or whatever. You can save it, and you can also either drag the image there, or you can click and you can upload it there. You can upload 2 to 3 images per spot. Please make sure that your font size isn't too tiny. I think we put 10 font or 12 font into the CED. That is because in the years past, students have uploaded stuff that are like 5-point font, and we can't read it. It's blurry. We can't see what it says, and it's very difficult. The readers try their very best to understand what's there, but they can't give credit for something they can't read. So please make sure that your screen grabs are ones that are readable by people who maybe need glasses. So think about that as you're doing that. And then you're going to save. Always double check your work. Always make sure that you're checking to make sure that it looks good before you do the final submission. Yes, 10-point font is what I said. The images also have a size limit. The digital portfolio needs them to be less than 5 megabytes. If you put something larger in there, it will scale it down, which could impact the way that it looks. So again, you want to make sure that you're always looking to see what the final product looks like. And I'm going to show you how to do that in a second. The digital portfolio is going to auto save for you every 2 minutes, but there's also a save button at the top and at the bottom. So you should be clicking that often. Every time, my advice to students is every time you write a little bit more, click save. Upload a picture, click save. Okay. Now, as I said, you get all your stuff in there. You are not finished. There is another step that you have to take. So uploading is just step one. You have to do a final submit. So this big yellow button that says submit final, you need to click that. You'll see an alert. If you haven't clicked it, you'll see an alert that says your work is not going to the College Board to be scored unless you final submit. So make sure you do that. When you do that, it will display a screen that looks like this that will have some attestations for you that you have reviewed the uploaded file. It gives you a button there. Click it, open it, view it, make sure it is what it is, what you expected it to be, that you didn't accidentally do a practice one or do a friend's one, or we hear this every year. I accidentally submitted my collaborative partners thing, and now you've been flagged for plagiarism. Accidents happen, but this is your time for you to verify this is actually my work that I want to be sent to the College Board for scoring. Make sure that your files don't contain any identifiable information, and that you understand that once you hit final submit, you cannot edit this anymore. You have to do this for all three components. It's not enough to do it just for the written response. It's not enough just to do it for the video. You have to do it for all three of your submissions. You also have to attest to the fact that you did not plagiarize any of your work, that you adhered to our plagiarism policy, which I showed you in this video, and that you have read through the student handouts, which hopefully we kind of did an overview tonight, but that you go and really in-depth read that, and that you did not collaborate on the written response or the video portion. So you're going to attest to those three things as well when you final submit. When you look in the digital portfolio, see this little dashboard, and what you want to see is, and what your teachers want to see is, you want to see those green check marks all across the board that everything is submitted as final. That's your confirmation. Again, like I said, make sure that you submit by May 20th, 2021 at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. Okay, we have about 10 minutes or so for questions. So I'm going to ask Maureen to ask me your questions that you have submitted, and we're going to answer as many as we can in the next about 10 minutes.
Yes, and we won't be able to get through all of the questions. It was a lively chat, so thank you for paying attention and submitting questions. But I think a lot of the resources that we've linked to will help. So Stephen, a lot of the students couldn't find the resources section where we said the slides were and the links to the student handout. Can you explain to the students where they can find the resources section right now? Stephen, are you able to? Oh, he says he's not allowed to speak. Okay. Stephen will, in the chat, in your chat, he can send a chat message to all of you. So he will explain where you can find the resources section if you haven't been able to find it yet. But in the resources section, you will find a copy of these slides. You will find links to the student handout that Crystal's going to, the digital portfolio student handbook that has all the instructions, and the instructions to the performance task. So many of your questions that you've submitted today have answers in those documents already. So obviously we suggest reading through all of those documents very carefully. Most of your questions today will be answered in those documents. The other thing, the number one question is, will this be recorded? Yes, this webinar is being recorded, and you will receive an email in a few days with the link to this recording. So you will be able to access this recording, so you can watch it over and over as many times as you like, and you have access to the slides right now in the resources section. Okay, Crystal, some questions. Where can students find the student create samples? Many of the students are asking, they wanted to see samples. Where can they find them? Is there a link in the resources section?
So there should be a link in the resources section, but I'm going to tell you where you can find it. On AP Central, on the student page, you can find AP Computer Science principles, and there's an exam page there, and there is a list of 9 samples there for you. In the videos that are going to be released in the next week or so, we are going to go through some of the samples that are on AP Central.
That's great. And actually, yeah, can you do another plug for the videos that are coming out? Because a lot of the students had very technical questions or clarifying questions. And I think there's a whole series of videos. So can you just explain to students at a high level, the videos that exist and the videos that are coming out?
Great. Yeah. So we have put in AP Classroom a series of videos by topics. So, and they've been developed by expert teachers. So if there's content that you're not quite sure of, you can go and watch those videos. You don't need to have them assigned by your teacher. They are in AP Classroom by topic. And then these supplemental videos are going to be just around the CREATE scoring guidelines. So each rubric row of the CREATE scoring guidelines will have its own video. Not each rubric row, each written response prompt will have its own video. So the first one will be row 1, so for prompt 3A. The second one will be row 2 and 3 for prompt 3B. Then 4 and 5 are together for 3C, and then 6 for prompt 3D. And those will be on AP Central as well. I think they're in the resources section is where they will go. They will also end up on YouTube for students to watch. And then we're going to do another series of videos later in April. Actually, all courses will get some AP Daily Live videos where teachers are doing some review. And those AP Daily Live videos that are happening in April are going to be centered around multiple choice. So if you need additional help for multiple choice, make sure you're kind of watching out for those videos that are coming towards the end of April.
Great. And there were a lot of questions about what's happening this year because of COVID. So there were questions about, is the CREATE task changing at all? And there were questions about the multiple choice exam. Is it happening online? Is it happening in person? What are the dates for the multiple choice exam? So can you fill students in on that information and tell them where they can find that information online?
Yes. So your AP Central page for computer science principals is a page that you need to go where you can find all the dates and information on the exams. The exam structure is going to remain the way that we intended it to be, which is 70 multiple choice questions, and then the CREATE performance task. That is not changing. There will be a paper pencil administration in May. I don't have the exact date, Maureen, so maybe we can look that up. But
it's on the website. So if you Google AP 2021 exam schedule, you can go to the website and you can click on CSP and you will see all the schedule for all of it. Now, it will depend on what your school is choosing to do. So it's not entirely student choice. Your school is deciding whether they can give an in-person exam, whether all students have to take it at home, whether they're giving, a digital in-school. So you have to check with your school about what exam they will be providing, and then the date will correspond to that exam administration.
Yep, and there's going to be a paper pencil in May, and then digital administrations in June.
It'll be the first one will be in May as well. So, yeah.
Okay.
Most of them will be in May. Yeah. Okay. There's a lot of questions about program code. What program code should they be writing? What language should they be writing their program code in? A lot of questions about can they use code.org, et cetera. So can you help them? There were questions about Snap and Scratch. And so can you fill students in on the programming language that they can use?
Yeah, so for computer science principals, you can use whatever language you are most comfortable in. So I would not try to learn a new language to do this. I would use whatever you've been using all year to prepare yourself for this course. That could be code.org. It doesn't have to be code.org. It could be Scratch. It could be Snap. It could be Python. The only language that we tell students explicitly to not use is HTML. HTML is not going to have the proper programming structures that we're looking for. And so students that have done projects in HTML have not scored well. And so we want to make sure students are aware that that's not the best choice. But JavaScript, Java, Python, Scratch, Snap, App Inventor, any of those and many, many more are appropriate. What you want to look for is a programming language that allows you to use lists or some kind of collection of data that allows you to create your own procedures or methods. that have parameters and that allow you to do sequencing, selection, and iteration. Use something that you're familiar with. Do not try, this is not the time to try to figure out a new language. Use something that you're really comfortable with, that you can do a good job.
So I know we're 1 minute over, but we did start 5 minutes late. So we'll go another couple minutes to answer some questions. Hopefully you can stay with us. There were a lot of questions about citation. So how do, is there a particular way that students have to do citation, and what do they have to cite? Do they have to cite music? Do they have to cite program code that they found on the internet? Do they have to cite images, et cetera? Can you fill them in, Crystal?
Yeah, anything that you did not create, you need to cite. So if you're using images, if you're using music, if you're using you're using starter code, you need to cite that. And the best place to do that is in your program code itself. You can write comments. If your programming language allows you to include comments, you can include them right in the programming language. If it doesn't, then what you would do is, as you're capturing your program code into a Word document to create it into a PDF, you would just add those comments directly into that Word document. And it doesn't have to be formal or fancy. It just needs to be clear that you're giving credit to someone else. So I got these images from wherever you got them from. I took this program code from this website to start off with, and really clearly mark what is someone else's and what is your original program code and thoughts.
And then can you just elaborate that there's no particular citation method that's required?
Correct. There's not a particular one. We just want you to be acknowledging what's yours and what's not yours. And the best way to do that is just to write a comment in the code that says where it came from. You don't have to know MLA or any of those kind of styles to do this. We just want an acknowledgement of what's yours and what's not yours.
And then additionally, again, with the citation, when they import libraries, do they cite what library they're using and where they got it from?
Yep, absolutely. A library is like any other program code that you're borrowing. So it just needs to be a quick little citation. I borrowed this from, or it was built into the language. You can just say that.
Crystal, was there a question? I know you went through a lot of the questions. We only have about 1 or 2 more minutes left. Are there ones that you wanted to cover in particular?
I tried to cover them as I went through.
We covered a lot of the most common ones just up at the top. So I'll just start going through them then. Does it count as sequencing if it is in a loop or an if-else statement? This is for the Create Performance Task programming.
Yeah, so we kind of talked about this tonight. So sequencing just means you have statements in order, or or multiple statements. And so if you have iteration, and if you have iteration, you're going to have a couple things there that you're doing. So you're actually doing sequencing when you do iteration. You're actually doing sequencing when you do selection. So if you have sequencing and if you have selection and you have iteration, you automatically have sequencing. And so we have a little decision rule that says programs that have iteration and selection automatically have sequencing.
There was also a lot of questions about the video recording. So can they get help from their teacher to record the video? Can another student help them record the video? Can they use a computer-generated voice with the video? Can you just elaborate more on the video and sort of any assistance, or what if they can't get it to work? How can they be successful with that?
Right. So if you're struggling with the video technology, like whatever you're using to record is not working, that falls under that rule about being able to get help with your equipment. But you are really supposed to be able to record this on your own. Now, it doesn't have to be fancy. Some kids take their phone and they record the screen, and that's totally fine. If you need somebody to hold the phone for you because you're playing the game that you created, that's not really collaboration. You are actually just saying, hey, hold this phone here so I can do my video recording. That's totally okay. But it really should be you controlling what is going to be seen in the video.
Great. Well, we're definitely at time. We're 5 minutes over now, so that's the hour. We don't want to keep you. But Crystal, why don't you close us out? Thank you for presenting. Maybe do another plug for the videos that are coming up, and close us out.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate all the hard work that students are doing. We know that this is a pretty tough year for you all. And it's just so nice to see a group of students that have such great perseverance through a time that can be really challenging. So we wish you all the very best of luck. Please make sure that you watch this video again if you have questions, that you read all the information about the performance test so that you can do your very best work, and then look for those videos that are coming out that are going to really do a deeper dive into the scoring guidelines and help you to really understand those samples that are on AP Central. So wishing you all the best, and don't wait until May 20th to submit your performance task. Submit it early. Be early. Early is better than on time in this case. So thank you all and have a good night.